Hi, folks.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Excellent. So started a discussion with Greg Costal of Microsoft, former colleague, on the workload identity. So maybe we'll get to it today. I asked the attestation SIG to look at it.
Cool.
Have you had a chance to look at it?
No. Put it in the link now. Let me just have a quick scan.
Oh, gee, okay.
Let me see if I can find it. Maybe I may have.
It was on the mailing list. It's just the documents are on one thing right now, and my iPad is another.
Okay, no worries. Was it? Oh, this here we are.
I can
Integrate and
email it
verify
to you.
with identity provider for strong. I've got it.
Yeah, okay. Are you going to be at the ATF, Whimsy?
No, I don't. I've never actually been an ITF person.
No. You can do remote. It's like $100 to attend virtually per day.
Yeah,
So,
I've
that's
just
what
never
I'm
got
going to do.
involved with it, and maybe I ought to, but I've never found it.
Well, Whimsy, we need to get involved with. Like, okay, so it's ITF, doesn't matter, because it has very strong ties to confidential computing because it's workload identity, and that's what I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody. We'll just wait a couple more minutes, see if more people join. Mark, good to see you here. I read through your I read through the parts of your doc that you pointed out in the email.
Yeah,
It was interesting reading for sure.
I'm a very, very big believer in this idea. So I want to, I really want to have it see the light of day.
Yeah, I think that certainly from my perspective, a lot or most of the things you're talking about, the problems you're seeing I certainly see the same things and agree. There's so many things we have to do to kind of complete the puzzle, and you touch on some of them, and then I think some that are still
Oh,
out there that also have to be done.
okay, well,
Such
you
a,
should write those up so we can like basically do a complete picture, and then
Mhm.
what I find sort of popping up a level because I participate in all these forums, and there are almost no customers in these forums. Like I represent a customer because I work for a regulated institution, right? And of course, my background is in core engineering.
Mhm.
But it's because of that people don't complete these loops. It's because everybody works on their little piece of it, but nobody actually, or few people actually tried pulling it together end to end.
Yeah, yeah.
I know you guys have because you put like payment processing on Azure, right? So, but
Mhm.
that's it's easier for you to do because you control the entire stack.
Mhm.
We operate in multiple clouds and
Yeah.
don't have a way of just going and changing, the operating system if we need something. So,
Yeah, yeah. All right. We're a handful of minutes after the hour. Time is always scarce. We typically have lots and lots to chat about. So welcome to today's meeting. I am the chair for today. And according to my notes from last time, there are two topics on the radar. But before we jump into them, does anybody have anything that they want, anything short and sweet they want to bring to the group's attention? And I'm looking at
I
you,
do
Mike.
just real quick. So, and this is just FYI, it may impact this group a little bit. The Cloud Security Alliance is updating the cloud controls matrix, which is basically the set of cloud controls that cloud customers need to build. And there are multiple changes. I can only speak for two. So on the CEK, cryptographic encryption key management domain, control domain, the control specification that used to say that you need to protect data in transit and at rest now includes a provision for protecting data in use. That doesn't say how, and as it shouldn't, but this is the first real requirement we have out in the industry to actually utilize some form of data in use protection. That is a positive development from the point of view of adoption. So now that required to implement this control, people will start wondering how to do that. And, we'll have implementation guidelines around that. So that's the first one. The second change will be in the identity and access management control domain. And it's going to be a change in the number of control specifications, nothing specific to confidential computing, but there was a lot of confusion in the previous version of CCM where identity was primarily thought of as a user identity. So you had to like things around, oh, you need to manage your passwords and have strong passwords, etc. The new IAM domain now talks about effectively human and non-human entities. And there's like different language there, but you can see where I'm going with that. We're going to basically see the management for automation, all automated identities, also strongly governed in terms of you need to have a strong credential, you need to manage it, all sorts of verbiage around that. And again, this also can be helped quite a bit by the use of confidential computing because it gives you this strong workload identity that I hope is going to be easier to manage. So again, that's all I wanted to bring up because it has impact in part on the attestation sake.
Well, thanks, Mark. What did you say it was called?
Cloud controls matrix. So, the terms you need to just scroll down. I can send you offline the worksheet that they're working on, and it will be published soon. I think that we'll be talking about like human and like an automated identities, or.
Okay.
But the point is that we're going to have stronger wording specifically around understanding that not just humans have identities, systems, processes, workloads.
Got it.
They
I
have
heard human and
identities.
automated, and I just want to
Yeah,
make sure I heard
human,
it correctly.
non-human, or you
Thanks.
can say human automated. I have to pull up the spreadsheet to see exactly what they
Okay.
said. And
All right.
it's still a little bit work in progress, but the direction is to where we are no longer just managing human identities. We're now managing identities around automation as well.
Okay. Thanks.
And that's actually huge.
Yeah, it is. Thank you for that update. I see 2 hands raised, and I don't know who was first.
Osama was first.
Okay, hi everyone. Hi Greg. So yeah, I have a quick update on the CCC SIG meeting that we were planning in person, and that is we have now a room booked for us in the same venue of FOSDEM where the event will take place. So we got it for free, so there's no additional funding required. So that's on Friday afternoon, just before FOSDEM. And I believe then in that case, everyone can fly Friday morning and there should not be any costs related to traveling as well. So the estimate that we have given is now perfectly still valid and there should be no additional costs related to that.
Can you say what
Right.
what times you have this room, just to make traveling easier?
So that room, they booked it from, I think 9. I need to pull up the email quickly just to be very precise, but they booked it from 9 until 5, I believe. I will drop an email precisely, but I think the plan that we have is that everybody travels in the morning and we will make a quick schedule, like a kind of a plan, who presents what or what exactly happens. So now
And
it's up to the SIG to decide how to do it. So probably, I think like we start around 1 p.m. and go up to 5, something like that, so that everyone can travel in the morning, reach there by afternoon, and then we meet.
are we going to make it open, or just for SIG members, or just for members of the TAC, or anyone?
So-
I heartily recommend making it open to everyone. Just it makes it easier in terms of antitrust type discussions, I think.
I didn't follow that part. So you are saying we should not invite others. Is that correct?
I'm saying we should we should make it open to all.
Okay.
I'm not saying we
Okay,
should just
okay.
invite everyone, but we should
Okay.
certainly make it
Open to
open to
everyone.
all. Yeah.
So there are room limitations. I think what they said was, if I recall correctly, it was like 30 people's capacity in that specific room. And we need to think about that capacity. If we are open to all, at least we had to be open to the organizers. That's where we get the room for free. So we invited the group of organizers there, who I'm not sure how many people they will be attending. So we need to still coordinate, but at least we should have capacity for us and the organizers or the hosts in that sense. And then we see how many seats are left. So it's up to the SIG that who exactly is traveling now, so that we have an estimate to know who exactly is traveling, how many people we have from the SIG, and then we open it to others, and then we kind of make a selection or make it first come first serve basis, or do something that we do not run out of that capacity which we have.
And so the organizer is Jan Tobias Milbeck from ULB, or?
So he was, yeah, that's correct. So he's Jan Tobias, but he said he has a meeting in Berlin. He might not be able to attend it himself, but at least there will be someone from his group who will be helping us out. And there is one of his student who is working on close topics to attestation, something on the root of trust and so on. So he said he will be happy to let him present his work as a short lightning talk. Yeah.
I see. Okay, thanks.
Mike, I think you're next.
Yeah, just say that in OSS Japan, I presented a new set of slides, around some specific use cases, very much based on attestation and the capabilities it gives us. It would be great if I had a chance at some point to present those to this group. Doesn't need to be this time round. Probably won't be, but at some point I'd like. There are basically 4 different use cases, of which 2 are closely related, and I don't think, certainly most of them will not be new to the people here. One of them might be, the Web3 might be, but I would certainly like feedback, and if they're useful, I'd love other people to use them as well. So and the slides will be available to anyone to use as well, of course, because they're slides for the CCC. So just letting you know that, really.
Cool, thanks, Mike. I quickly just jotted down that in today's meeting notes, so hopefully we'll have it out there as a tickler to remind us. It's
Thank
third in the list today. Given how things go,
I'm not expecting we'll get to it. That's fine.
Yeah. Okay.
At some point. Thank you.
So thank you. So the next topic on the list, Osama, you're here today. I think last time you didn't anticipate being here today. So I'm happy you're here. Welcome. My notes and recollection is there was still a bit of lingering discussion on the RATLS discussion, and in particular, I think around the topic of freshness is what I recall. So this is, I think we decided, or in my mind, we decided to leave a bit of time or offer a bit of time at the beginning of this meeting to see if anybody wanted to complete that conversation if they felt it wasn't complete. And Osama, you being here, that probably makes it ideal because you can be central to coordinating or answering questions.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Greg. Yeah, I didn't anticipate because there are sometimes some last minute changes in the meetings, and I'm here for the IETF, but I did manage to have this. And we had a side meeting in the morning where we did discuss some of the things or kind of a tutorial there. And yeah, so Ned is here, Thomas is here. So we had a chance to discuss a few things. We will continue the discussions during the week. And
Okay.
otherwise I can, but I,
So is there,
that's not,
yeah,
sure.
Does anybody, maybe I'm presuming wrong, but does anybody have a particular topic from last time that they feel like they want to bring up now and try to complete? Or are we good to go with the next topic, which is strong identities and from Mark? Okay, I hear silence, so I'm assuming that nobody else.
I have another thing. I have 2 things.
Okay.
I want to make sure that we have attestation 6 blessing on the verifier governance pattern. And at this point, it would be, we went through several rounds of comments. So, if there are remaining comments, I would like to discuss them. And if not, I will just say, okay, we're good. If you ever need to make changes later, they're still living documents. So it's not like a Bible or, it's not going on the blockchain or anything like that. But it would be like to say, okay, that's done. We're moving on to other things we need to do.
Okay. Did you have a specific request for this group? I think that you're referring to a document that you're trying to say, are you all, is the feedback complete? I think is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, basically that. I mean, have we heard all your feedback? Are there any remaining strong objections? And if not, we'll basically say, we attestation 6 okay, and we are, I've done a fair bit of work addressing all feedback that could reasonably be addressed. And I know Osama did not get his formal specification, but these are not formal specification documents. Yeah, we can talk about that. But
yeah, I didn't mean formal specifications. When we say specifications, so if you don't have the access to the code which is running in the verifier, how are you supposed to audit that? That's my question. So one thing is specification, another thing is open source availability of the code that this verifier is running. So
okay,
sure, you can do some kind of a static audit.
I can speak to that. So it's so there are musts and there are shoulds, and you are correct. If you have open source, it certainly helps establish assurance. There's no question about that. But when you are like a bank, like I represent here, a regulated institution, we're not about eliminating risk. We're about understanding and accepting the risk. So for instance, we may say we trust AWS Nitro for confidential computing, although it's not hardware-based, although Amazon is up and down the TCB, and they own the operations, they own the hardware, they own the software, right? It may still be okay for us to accept this risk and basically say that is sufficient for our purposes. So governance is not about necessarily, saying, okay, we now have some sort of a mathematical proof that this is correct. It's more like we trust the supplier, and that's enough for us. It may
You are
not be enough for
again
somebody
mixing
else.
two things. I would say, Mark, you are mixing two things. I'm not talking about formal proofs. I'm talking about the audit. Governance is supposed to audit that thing. And if you audit a static thing, so this thing does not remain static. So you add new features, you have new vulnerabilities and so on. So even if you have a closed source, you go to some authority to audit that. How is that supposed to be valid and applicable for, let's say, 10 years? So that's my question. I'm not talking about formal proofs. I'm not talking about precise specifications. An orthogonal issue to that is how do you audit it? And that's, I would argue, is a part of the governance, unless you really want to add garbage solutions into it and then say governance agrees to have that all that garbage solutions into the confidential computing. Unless that is your concern or intent, I wouldn't see any good reason to eliminate that case, that you should have some way to audit that.
Sure. So audit has two different meanings. So the way I hear you say audit is more along the lines of we need to look at the source code, and otherwise we cannot be sure, or and basically everything, your build processes, your supply chain management, right? Inspect. Another way of the way the word audit is used in the governance circles is you have a set of policies, and the auditor wants to make sure that your policies match standard requirements, whatever they are, and that the evidence is available to the auditor to know that you matched whatever policy is stated. So if my policy is, use a trusted supplier, and the standards, the regulations are okay with that, then the auditor wants to make sure that we use the trusted supplier and no more than that, right? So what we're trying to do actually is closer to the first one in the governance working group, because we're trying to say we would like to write our standards, governance patterns in such a way that if you comply with them, that you're actually more likely to be secure, because like compliance and security, they're like a Venn diagram. You can be very compliant and not very secure, and vice versa, right? So we're trying to move closer to compliance. So I hear you, and I am not actually averse to saying something along the lines of, you should inspect your verifier, all the things about it before you place trust in it, and you should be aware that any changes are introduced into the verifier code. Maybe there is some room for that type of language, but it cannot be a must. It would be at best a should for these reasons.
I would argue it's a must. That's a single point of failure. If your verifier is not correct, then everything of attestation is, the whole thing is broken.
So, and I would disagree, Osama, in that there must be a trust relationship to the AVS, but inspection of that code is one of the best ways to allow you to create such a trust relationship, but it is not the only way. And you may use a number of different measures, including just endorsement by the authority running it, to make that decision. So I strongly agree that it's one of the measures that should be considered, but it shouldn't be a must as a definitive decision as to whether you trust it or not. That would be my view.
And actually, I would suggest that we're having an attestation, a GRC SIG meeting tomorrow, 7 a.m. Pacific. So we can move that discussion. If you're interested in participating in it, let's not take room here. Let's have that discussion in that forum, and Asami, you're more than welcome to join. And let's just do it that way so we can move to workload identity.
I would love to hear what Deanna has to say first, and then let's go on.
If we consider attestation to be just an extension of PKI, where we're not just saying this key or represents this organization, we're also saying this key is representing an organization's workloads, which have been proven to itself to be what they expect. And I think that is more in line with how websites operate today. They have their own certificate authorities that assert that what you're talking to is that domain. And if you add on attestation, you're saying that you are sending data to a domain that is operating within known and expected parameters. And I think that that is a valid first step before full transparency, because it's particularly hard to make sure that the bits that you're running are the bits that everybody else can see.
Okay.
So happy to introduce suggested changes to the document. Just put them in as comments or suggested changes. We're happy to review and incorporate them. But probably best done when we actually have a document open and we'll work on it. Ultimately, what I'm after is that we have a broad agreement on the text of that particular pattern, right? So.
Okay, Mark, if you feel we're done on this topic and ready to move on to the next one?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, again, please join us tomorrow for a discussion.
Thanks. And the next topic is you, Mark, strong identity. So if you want to take over and lead us where you want to lead us.
Yes, certainly. So let's see. So I made an observation that confidential computing, protecting data in use, is not the whole thing that confidential computing offers. And ultimately, what it is that we care about in the real world is that we know what code accesses which data, and only authorized code accesses the data. It's really no different from users, right? So in an enterprise, you want to make sure that you know which users have access to what, but we really didn't have that for code because we never really had a strong way of establishing code identity. So today, code identity is often bearer tokens. You place some plain text credentials on a disk you mounted inside your container, or you procure them inside some virtual machine, and it's like best effort. However you want to stick a credential in there, that's what's going to happen. And as a result, you have things like lateral movement of credentials. So your credentials never really bound to your workload, or your workload may be taken over by malware, and then it starts doing something entirely different. So what confidential computing effectively allows you to do, if done right, is that you know exactly what code is running. You can measure this code, you can attest it, and as a result, any key that the workload generates is guaranteed to not leak from that workload. Again, modular implementation bugs and other things. But once you have that capability, you can basically say, okay, if you give me some sort of a CSR backed by a workload held private key, I should be able to attest it, and I should be able to issue a credential. I know that that credential is going to be strongly bound to the workload in question. And all of a sudden, what you have is you have honest to God zero trust. So strong identity management, which is one of the 3 zero trust tenets. And you have, at that point, no significant difference between the measure your user identities and your code identities, your workload identities. So on that sort of intuition, what I'm hoping that we will build is a system of strong workload identities now backed by confidential computing that we can deploy broadly in the industry. And this is where I want to interact with the Whimsy working group and the IETF, and I want to bring the cloud controls matrix from CSA and whatever the consortium is doing. And together we can hammer out the necessary standards, policies, procedures, governance, etc. So I socialized, I sent out this document that has a sample diagram of how these things can be put together, but it's just that end-to-end has not been proposed by anyone yet, so that's why what I'm doing here.
So do you,
Greg?
I think I have two high-level questions. One is, do you want to walk us through a little more detail, like based on your doc, perhaps, like the diagram at the end of the doc, perhaps? And the other, the biggest question in my mind after I went through what you pointed, the doc myself, was it looked like there was, from a Venn diagram perspective, there was a fair amount of overlap with Whimsy, and yet this seems to be you seem to be thinking about it independent of Whimsy. So why in your mind, maybe I've misinterpreted, but why isn't this essentially just collaborating with the Whimsy folks to kind of ensure that the scenarios and requirements you're thinking about are handled by the emerging Whimsy design?
So there is no intent to build anything separate from Whimsy. And I, in fact, am collaborating with them and have been, participating in both the summer IETF and sort of hoping to join the IETF meeting on Thursday. What I have not seen yet is the discussion of this or really a lot of discussion about in the consortium here. So no, I don't want to build anything separate. I am happy, however, to share the document that I.
So when you say not a lot of discussion in the consortium, you mean in this particular
yes,
SIG?
in the attestation SIG specifically. Yeah.
So
because again, attestation. So that's what I observed. Like attestation says, okay, well, give me some measurements, I'll give you some results. But the RATS, the RATS RFC doesn't really talk about how to integrate your attestation with your enterprise IT identity management system, and that's what needs to happen.
Well, I'm personally 1,000% with you. The one of the work items I put in the in our GitHub repo, I don't know, 6-12 months ago, was essentially to discuss workload identity before I knew about the Whimsy effort. And the response there, I think generally was, take a look at what's going on in Whimsy.
Yeah, and I'm with you. Yes, that's what needs to happen. So, so I'm sharing this document right now. So let me just first the structure of the document.
Just one mechanical point. Salma has his hand up. Do you want to take his question now, or after
yeah,
you?
absolutely. Yeah, of course. So I'm not keeping track.
Just a clarification question. So, do you have this document shared already? And secondly,
I do. I emailed it to the mailing list.
okay. And
I'm just struggling with putting the right document up here on my shared screen.
so maybe you could say in 2 minutes, like what is, you said kind of a preamble, but I don't see what is strong identity of workload in your opinion. Could you probably clarify it a little bit more?
Yes. So strong workload identity is effectively a mechanism by which the workload generates a asymmetric key pair. Uses the attestation service and coupled with the identity management system to have a credential issued to the workload around that key. So that could be a JOT or it could be an X509 certificate. And following that, it can participate in basically accessing data on relying parties as any other identity would, as a human would, as a any piece of code would. But what's beautiful about it is if the workload is running under confidential computing, then the credential is strongly, private keys become strongly bound to that workload instance. So today you end up having to manage keys and you put them in HSMs, and then you have effectively as many keys as you have identities. And you don't really want that. It's hard to manage. If a workload can generate and certify its own key, then you can have a short-lived, like basically as short-lived as the workload itself key, and the identity gets bound to that key and can be used as staff. So if you actually look at the end-to-end of it, it becomes way easier to manage and actually quite secure. So this document puts it in the context of the NIST Zero Trust Architecture Standard, and you can still read the rest of it. But the parts that I wanted to pay attention to is the spreadsheet, this table, sorry, that explains point by point how strong workload identity might be achieved. And at the end, if you scroll down after all the analysis, again, that's ZTA based, there is this thing here that is a flow chart, like swim lane diagrams of how it would integrate, which again, there are many ways to skin the cat, probably best to do it in a Whimsy compatible way. But also remember when in this forum, I basically said you need to integrate a verifier with your identity management system. I got called reception. People basically said, no, they're actually two separate services. So I basically redrew this diagram to separate verifier from your identity provider. But I mean, of course, they could be combined. And that would be my preference, fewer round trips, better overall availability because fewer points of failure, etc. So I just received some share requests for this document, so let me just grab people access right away. So let me do that.
So is it, if I understand correctly, basically you are saying that it's a workload generates a asymmetric key pair within the
Yes.
TEE, and it sends over to the certification authority, and that certification authority along with the evidence, is this correct?
Yes.
And that certification authority makes a decision based on that evidence, and it issues it a certificate, which is what you are calling as its identity. Is it correct?
Correct. Yes. So this is basically the same thing that Whimsy does, but I'm
Not
just
really Whimsy.
emphasizing.
So that's more of a thing that's proposed in the LAMPS working group, which is attested CSR. I don't see how that is different from attested CSR.
It's probably not. It's probably not. It's I would like there to be a way of getting either a CSR and an X509 certificate, or a way to do just application level security with a JOT. Hopefully they're similar. But the JOT one probably doesn't require a CSR because it's not an X509, but something similar in how it's done. But I mean, the way Whimsy draws it, I mean, hopefully would be compatible with that too. Like the exact mechanism is not something I'm insisting on here. What I am saying, however, is what we do want a standard way for confidential computing and attestation to integrate with enterprise identity management so that each workload instance can get its own identity. And then you become freer in terms of how you interact because all standard mechanisms are automatically compatible.
Attested CSR is very far from being a standard, so it's still in work in progress. And Mike and Hannes, two of the co-editors, are here in Dublin for the IETF meeting. And yeah, I don't see that becoming a standard very soon. So there are still issues around freshness, and there are various open issues which are being discussed. I don't think that's going to be very soonish kind of a thing.
Okay. Well, it could be any mechanism. Again, the nature of the mechanism, so long as it's compatible, broadly compatible and secure, is like as you know, with authentication authorization, there are usually multiple mechanisms, right? So we may need to do a couple different ways, but we do need a set of possible standards to work with.
Yeah, but I would not claim that as a strong workload identity. So you had until you have a complete solution. I mean, this is one of the proposals which is ongoing, which has issues, which has problems, is unsolved, and is not a complete solution, I would argue. I wouldn't claim that as a strong workload identity and is done and is ready to use and so on. So I wouldn't
So
say
attested
it's there.
CSR would be a mechanism and strong workload identity is a goal. So let me again explain what a strong workload identity is. Strong workload identity is something that has a key that's unique per workload instance, that is strongly bound to the workload instance, and that can take shape of an X509 certificate, or it can take shape of a JOT, but ultimately it is a form of non-bearer token, strongly bound token that only that workload instance can use.
But the
And
question there
it is compatible with all your existing authentication authorization mechanisms.
So that depends. Now the question is, what is strong binding between that key? So everyone generates a key within the DE and then somehow related to the workload instance. That's done by all of the solutions. Like I had a design options diagram, pre, intra, post. And within that, we have discussed many times in the SIG, like there are various solutions, included attested CSR, TLS attest, and so on. The question there is, what makes that a strong binding? I think that's the most important
the strong
question.
binding is the fact that the key is generated inside the workload instance and cannot
Everybody
leak
does that.
outside.
That's
Okay,
every
and
solution does that. There is no difference in any of those solutions. Why is it strong?
okay, there are people who raised hands, so let's open it up.
Gary's before me.
Yeah. Yeah, and I apologize if this is already in the paper, but this is kind of going along the line of questioning that Sama is asking. I'm on my work computer, so I can't get access to Google Docs right now. So the attestation is critical in what you're calling obtaining the identity. For instance, from a trusted CA. In the context of confidential compute, what do you do if the security state of the TEE changes after the identity is obtained? So in other words, you have a freshness issue in that case, because the security, and an example could be, for instance, if you have a situation where the workload is being run on a local inferencing engine for a machine learning application, but then after the identity is attained, for some reason, it's decided that an external engine must be initialized, and
Right.
therefore it needs to be attested to if you're going to complete the security story. Now, do you address that in the paper?
I did not address it in the paper yet, so and again, happy to extend it. Let me give you my thoughts on that. So, you gave an example. I have a simpler example. So maybe there is like a Python engine that executes a Python script, and clearly, if you're executing different script, you have different identity. You should not be reusing the identity you already had. So you have two options. You can either restart the Python engine and reattest, or you can say the Python engine is written in such a way that before it goes and downloads and executes a new script, it invalidates or erases the key, the identity, workload identity key that it had, and goes procures a different one, right? So either one of the mechanisms will work. But a lot of confidential computing, the workload is actually fixed and not extensible. And in that case, it's just the duration of the workload.
And I think it's fair to say that you could make decisions based on knowledge of whether a workload is mutable or not, as to what type of attestation, how you feel about the binding, and whether reattestation is required.
I would feel very suspicious of any binding to a mutable workload.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so that would be the quick and dirty answer, is that if you can extend the workload at runtime, then this isn't the mechanism for you for that case. This is not that would not be a candidate for a secure identity assignment in this case. Is that what I'm hearing?
I think so.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, but it's just like my key observation is right now, like the way RATS is written, and even the way Whimsy is written, although that's changing, there is not a a standard way for me and the enterprise to say, I'm launching this workload has an identity, and I want to manage that identity for purposes of like relying party access and everything else, much like I manage any other identity in the system. So, one of the, like today, what kind of works is your workload identity can get you a key out of an HSM. And with that key, you can download some encrypted data and you can decrypt it. Well, that's, a use case. But how about I don't need to go get keys out of HSMs, and I can go participate in, interacting with other relying parties directly. And there you actually have this really interesting caveat. A relying party policy, authorization policy, is usually something that needs to be extra stable over time, because you have one workload, but you can have maybe dozens of relying parties to interact with. And when your workload is upgraded and your measurements change, you do not have, it's not practical, it's not deployable to go chase all your relying parties down and change the policies on those, right? So you need to map your reference values into a set of claims that would be something like, this is my HR application, or this is my loan authorization application, and it's cleared for highly confidential data or whatever other set of claims around that. And those claims must remain stable, like for years, right? As your workload goes to multiple levels of upgrade. So the volatility needs to be captured in the attestation and identity issuance process. Are there any raised hands to look at?
Yeah, I think next on the raise hands list. We got a handful of thoughts. One is early on, you mentioned the world is essentially built on bearer tokens now, right? You get a bearer token from an identity provider and you hand it off to whoever you're trying to interact with, and they validate that bearer token. And one of the things we're doing here, in both Whimsy and in here, is there's no more bearer tokens. It's all proof of possession. And I think in this case, in the Whimsy case, it all ultimately, even when you get your token from your identity provider, when you go and authenticate with some party out there, it's going to be a proof of possession conversation. You're going to prove ownership, in this case, like that initial asymmetric key pair, I believe. If that's the case, which makes sense, it sounds to me like, I'm totally bought into that. That's the right future. You early on in this discussion, I think I heard a statement along the lines of, and once you kind of get through, this process here, then what you have, you can go work with the existing world. And I don't think, from how I understand it, with this or the Whimsy design, where once we go to proof of possession, game over for you take your service that's running now and only understands bearer tokens, and you can somehow magically have a more secure proof of possession conversation, right? Did I miss something, or was this just did I miss something, or did I miss here?
Well, I don't know exactly know what you mean by game over. I'm simply saying that so how you work today? Today, you start your container loads some credentials from a mounted disk, and then it goes and does MTLS or anything else with whatever it needs to go reach outside of itself. And I'm saying, instead of going and procuring credentials and sticking it on a volume and having container go mount the volume, pick it up, all your workloads, your Lambdas, your containers, your VMs, they go engage in this different dance where they start out, the very first thing they do is attest themselves, go procure credentials for themselves via this attestation identity process. And from there on, it's everything like it was before, except the tokens are no longer bearer tokens.
So I think what I'm hearing is, like, if you look at this diagram, if you do proof of possession essentially between the workload and the identity provider. So the workload proves that it owns the asymmetric key pair, and the identity provider, enforces that. But then if the result from that is a bearer token, and the relying party on the last line doesn't, verify the ownership of that asymmetric key pair. So I think that's what I'm hearing. That gets you this hybrid world where you're using proof of possession for one step, but you're not using it for the other
You would
step.
never issue a bearer token in this diagram, like never.
Okay,
right?
so if you never issue a bearer token, then the world has to be replumbed to understand, to enforce bearer tokens, right? As I understand it, right? The relying parties out there, their authorization logic, it validates bearer tokens, right? They have to go recode it, get updated identity libraries, et cetera, et cetera. It's not
that would, right? So much like if you use MTLS, probably no change. But if you use a bearer token based thing, then yes, of course you'll have to change that. But I believe with JOTs you can have proof of possession.
So okay, that clears that up. Thanks. So there's I think there's some scenarios where it might work, and others where there'll have to be updates in relying party, libraries, etc.
And this is the other hat I'm wearing in the governance world is bringing this future to us now. Like once it's a regulatory requirement, institutions no longer have leeway to say no, we'll do this weak thing. Like we no longer use secret handshakes either. Eventually, things get replaced. Like MFA became a requirement recently, right? So like passwords are being phased out, and it's not without its replumbing cost, but meeting regulatory obligations is more important.
All right, thanks. I'll turn the floor over to Osama, who has his hand up.
Yeah, Greg, it's kind of a follow-up on your question. I was thinking also about the JOTs, like TLS. So the last row in your diagram is established TLS, and that's what it is giving to the input as that if that identity is a JOT. TLS does not.
It doesn't.
By
the
default,
diagram doesn't cover JOTs. The diagram as written only does MTLS, and that's because I kind of had to do like a clean splice. But you can also imagine a world where the credential issued is a JOT and not next overnight cert, and then it would not be MTLS there; it would be something else. So it would be maybe like server authenticated TLS.
TLS will not allow JOT to be used directly.
Yes,
it has to be somehow.
Right. It needs to be, the diagram needs to be redrawn for JOTs. But also I encourage you to look, so under the NIST 857, which defines zero trust architecture, they talk specifically about strong identity management, which would never was strong before actually, but it can be now. And I basically took the document and all the requirements in it, and I basically, in a case-by-case basis, illustrated how all of the NIST SP 857 requirements can be met with this, including things like the bill of material has changed, and now we can very quickly go turn over the policy that says, the old vulnerable version is no longer valid. So things like that, and they're all captured in these other sections of the document to say, like, we already thought about these problems, and look how we can address them all using this new technique.
So what I'm hearing is that you are saying that NIST document says that this is the strong identity. This attested CSR kind of thing is the strong identity. Is it correct?
Well, the NIST document predates this, of course, but the NIST document gives you examples of how to do identity-based zero trust. So there are three different ones. And
so does it mention attested CSR? Does it mention attested CSR as?
So I quote passages from that. So the NIST document is public, you can download it. And it basically says you can do zero trust one of these three ways. Two of them are not interesting here because they have to do with like network segmentation and other things. But the first one is, and again, let me maybe scroll up and I'll show you. So of course it doesn't mention attest.csr because attest.csr did not exist when this document was written, but it says DTA using an enhanced identity governance. So that's basically the one that we care about. So just make it bold. And then you go down here in these sections, talk about specifically the first one, strong identity governance. Says all data sources and compounding services are considered resources, blah, 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 blah. So for all of these, there is a breakdown here. So the first requirement, this is what DTA says, and this is what my strong worker identity proposal answer to that requirement is. And so this is straight out of NIST, and that section would be the response. And then you go down ×7, and it basically talks about all of them.
Yeah, I think Giri has put it very nicely in the chat. If you look at his comment, I think he's exactly putting it in very nice words what I'm kind of thinking about. So maybe you can you try to address this? Is it really out of scope of your work? So, and I see that as a very limited use case for that you are trying to address. Is it correct?
Yeah, but it's still relevant. I mean, in this, getting a
No,
CSR.
Giri, just to clarify, I fully agree with you. I was asking Mark if he's addressing.
Oh, okay, you're addressing
this,
me.
that,
Yes.
yeah.
Sorry.
It was a question for Mark that I agree with Giri what he's mentioning, and I wanted to clarify with Mark whether this use case is really out of scope, because I am thinking on same lines as Giri has nicely put it down.
Yeah, I mean specifically the comment about JOTS.
No, not
sorry,
about
which
jobs.
one?
So it's
not just data centers.
Yes.
That comment. I hope it would work not just for data centers, but it would work for IoT devices out there, right?
No,
so
it
your
will not.
IoT device can get.
It will not.
Why not?
It's a similar thing to what I said. The freshness is an issue, and you're balancing it against other things. So I mentioned the PC, but I mean an IoT device. I would think that the security state of the TEE is even more dynamic in that case if it's if it's battery powered device. Things are turning off and turning on. They may be memory mapped to the TEE. They may be accessible to the TE without any mutual authentication or attestation. What do you, but you've already issued the certificate. So what do you do then? So that's the.
Here's an issue, right? Okay, so I can speak to that. So a workload in the simple case is a single T, of course. A more complex workload might be a compound workload that contains multiple T's. And how we maintain the freshness of security state of that compound workload is a separate problem that's out of scope of what I wrote here. It needs to be a way of, there has to be a way of ensuring. So maybe if something, part of your workload gets powered down and then comes back up, you may be required to remeasure and reattest it. Or maybe like with T's, sometimes what you can do is you can seal some data to this instance. And when the instance powers down and comes back up, it can, from local storage, can recover the previous thing so long as the payload inside the T hasn't changed. So they're all solvable problems. But no, it's not intended just for data centers. I very much hope that it would work for all types of devices.
Maybe that might actually be a useful discussion in this paper. It's since we're in agreement that these aren't edge cases, these aren't specialized cases, and I think what do you do with the dynamic security state after the certificate has changed? Right. I mean, after the certificate has been issued.
I'm happy to add paragraphs to this, because again, it's like anything else. It's a working document. It's a way of communicating a set of ideas, and I tried to keep it focused on this. But or maybe we can have a separate document saying how do you maintain workload identity in a for a compound workload, and that would be like a thing in itself that we can focus on just solving that problem. Here's a set of mechanisms we can discuss, because this is more along the lines of I have a workload. it gets an identity, and that identity may be for a number of things that work together in concert. And that, yes, of course, it's a discussion on how to, how to maintain its security and how to understand its limitations, right? So, whether it's this document or a separate document, you can still break them down into layered issues.
Yeah. Okay.
But what I am, however, saying is, unless we integrate, confidential computing with identity management in a way that's deployable, we are going to have limited adoption. And what I'm after is broad adoption.
I'm personally 1,000% with you. And it seems like, and you seem to be on the same page. It seems like the Whimsy group is the current activity going down this path to making that happen.
Yeah, and I'm very much looking forward to participating in the Thursday's discussions. I'm coming up to speed on the latest drafts today. So, but again, attestation is, again, why am I bringing into attestation SIG? Attestation is not separate from identity management. Like, it needs to work together. Maybe it's a separate set of protocols, but from the point of view of me, a customer, I do not want to separately work with attestation and separately work with identity management and cobble something together and hope that it's compatible and that it works and it's manageable.
That makes total sense to me. I think, having scanned the Whimsy docs and scanned yours, I think you've got some ideas I didn't see there, such as the CI/CD integration and also the location of the verifier, and kind of sorting those out with the broader Whimsy folks would be interesting and perhaps useful, and part of what I'm guessing is on your radar.
So with you, yeah. So I'm like, when I do not know, I have to look at the agenda for Thursday, but we absolutely do need integration with things like bills of material and supply chain. They're very much top of mind for security folks, out there today.
Cool. All right. Well, we're 1 minute before the hour, so we're at the end of our time. Is there?
I'm going to grant reviewer access to everybody who asked for it, and perhaps we can resume this conversation, either virtually on the document or come back to this working group at some point. But I very much thank you for all your inputs. This is exactly what I was hoping for.
Okay, great. So yeah. I'm hearing, I think you consider this conversation complete for the moment, perhaps, bring it up again in the future, which I think means in terms of the list, the backlog, Mike, you would have time in a couple of weeks to discuss the use cases for attestation you want to talk about?
I'm not convinced I'm going to be here in a couple of weeks. I've got other commitments.
Okay.
Next time I'm on, please schedule. Sorry.
Okay, no worries. I don't see any of the other chairs online today, so I will coordinate with them offline as for an owner for the next meeting. And just FYI, we don't appear to have anything booked for 2 weeks out from now. So if you have some ideas of something you want to present or somebody you want to volunteer, feel free to share them. Share them with the group on Slack or on the mailing list.
And I'm more than happy to resume this conversation in 2 weeks also, because I don't think we're done. I think we've got to a place where we understand what the problem domain is, but there are multiple ways of getting to the intended result.
And you're going to talk to the Whimsy folks between now and then, correct?
I'm hoping so, for sure. Yeah.
All right. So I am fine. I to continue the conversation a couple of weeks. So if you're up for it, Mark, I'll pencil you in for the first slot.
Okay.
Okay, great. Okay, I think that concludes today's meeting. Thanks everybody for joining. Okay, have a good couple weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.